Hello, Onalaska High School Hilltoppers. This is Mr. Schaffner. This school year has started out different than any other school year that I've ever been part of. As we think about transitioning to having students in the building for in-person learning, there are a lot of different changes that we all need to be aware of and thinking about. In today's video, we'll talk about those changes. Everything from when to arrive at school, what doors to use, how the schedule will work, how lunch will work, all of the different details that will look just a little bit different than usual. And as we think about those details, the key thing that I want you to think about is that we are all incredibly adaptable. And we are all going to need to have a lot of flexibility as the year moves on, as we learn more, as we can do more. We have to be adaptable and we have to be flexible. Two key things that you're going to hear throughout the video today. One, the first one is to make sure that as much as possible, we need to make sure we're physical distancing. And the key distance is to be 6 feet apart. You will have times when you're walking down the hall, you'll have times when you're at your locker where you'll be closer than 6 feet to other people. But in all of our classrooms, at lunch, when you're talking to your friends, we have to be cognizant of maintaining that 6 foot distancing. The other key thing to think about is that from the time you walk in the building until the time you leave the building, other than when you're eating and drinking, you need to make sure you're wearing a mask. And when you're wearing your mask, two key things. You need to make sure that your mask is covering both your nose and your mouth. So again, those two key things to think about throughout the video. A, making sure your mask is on, covering your nose and your mouth. And B, that we're maintaining that 6 foot distancing. That second one is a lot harder to do. Students, as you've been in the building for other things, you're great about wearing your masks. The challenge though for many of us is to make sure we're keeping that 6 foot distancing because it's so natural to be closer than that. The only other change I want to talk about before we actually go into the school is what happens before you even come to school in the morning. These guidelines are important for all of us to be aware of. Parents, this is something that was shared earlier this week. I've also attached it to this email again. But the key things are to look at those symptoms in terms of the one symptom in the past 24 hours, or if you've had two of the symptoms in the last 24 hours. Keeping in mind if you should or shouldn't attend any school activity or in-person school, and then also keeping in mind if you're considered, quote, a close contact. And then finally, looking at if an agency has told you that you should stay home and avoid others due to possible COVID contact. These are something that we should all mentally go through in our head each morning before school. All right, at this point, remember, as we go in the building, we put our masks on, we maintain a 6 foot distancing. Let's learn about the other changes you need to be aware of. So some of the changes to be aware of when you first come to school in the morning. First off, where you enter the building. If you are a student who gets a ride here, if you get dropped off, if you walk here, we want you to enter the building through doors B, as in boy, off of Wilson Street. This is just like what it's been done like in the past. Students who ride the bus will come in the P doors by the Commons. Students that park on Oak Forest Drive can also come in through the P doors. Students that arrive that park in the junior or senior parking lot, we'd like you to come in the doors at the end of the field house. Another change is that the doors will not open until 7:15 a.m. What that means is sometime between 7:15 and probably 7:28, you'll arrive at school. If you want to get breakfast, you can do that, and there'll be a spot in the Commons for you to eat quickly. From there, you can go to your locker, use the restroom, but after that, you'll be going directly to your first hour class. You'll notice that the classrooms will look quite a bit different also in terms of how many students are in any single class that you're in. When you look at our classrooms, most of the classrooms will have anywhere from 14 to 18 desks depending on the size of the classroom. So that'll be a big change from the past. There'll be fewer students in a classroom, allows us to maintain that 6 foot distancing between students, as well as giving your teacher space in which to instruct. Because likewise, your teacher needs to make sure that he or she maintains that 6 foot distancing also. One change at the end of class, and this will be a relatively simple change, is that in the past when the bell would ring, students would get up, they'd all file out of the door, sometimes have a bit of a group by the door. This year, again, just to maintain that distancing, we want to emphasize that the students closest to the door file out, and then the next row, and then the following row, until the students that are farthest away from the door are leaving the classroom last. That shouldn't delay the time it takes you to get out of your classroom, but it should ensure that there's always spacing between you and other students. You've probably noticed in most public places that the water fountains have been some way, shape, or form shut off for people to use. That's no different with our water fountains. So keep in mind that while you can't get a drink the old-fashioned way, you're still able to bring your water bottle, use the water bottle fillers that are at most of our water fountains, and still be able to have water with you throughout the day. Last week I shared communication with all of you about how to determine if you are in the A group or the B group. Remember, if you log into PowerSchool, underneath your name, above your class list, you should see either A group or B group. Students who are in the A group will be here on Mondays and Thursdays. Students who are in the B group will be here on Tuesdays and Fridays. With that schedule, one of the most common questions I get asked is, Mr. Schaffner, if I'm in the A group, what happens for me on Tuesdays and Fridays then, in terms of how do I access class? The answer to that is it's going to look a little bit different depending on which class it is. Some of your classes will have a live session. So for example, your 8th hour algebra class with Mrs. Anderson might be a live Zoom class. So on Mondays and Thursdays, you're in class learning from Mrs. Anderson. On Tuesdays and Fridays during 8th hour from 2:03 to 2:50, you access the Zoom link and you Zoom into her class and learn at the same time as the students in the B group that are in her classroom at that time. Some of our classes don't work as well that way. When we think about Phy-Ed or music or art, in other classes, the teachers will instruct you in terms of how do you access the classroom if you're not using Zoom. Some parts of lunch will look similar to the past, other parts will look different. Students, you'll still come down the normal hallway that comes down from the main office, the hallway that's behind me in terms of the lunch line. When you come into the Commons, there will be 3 different serving windows that you'll be able to go to. All 3 of the serving windows will have the same 2 hot lunch options both days. They will be hot, it will be boxed, so it'll be much faster than what it's looked like in the past. We will not have the salad bar like we've had in the past. That's something that could come back later this year if the status of COVID in the county changes. Likewise, the normal spot where you would get your ketchup, your mayonnaise, we'll have packets of those that you can have with your lunch as opposed to the normal station that you would be going to. Another major change is that the tables have been removed from the Commons. Why? Simply put, the tables take up too much space for the number of students that we can have seated at them. Instead, we have student desks in the Commons. They've been spaced out. They're 6 feet apart from each other. That still allows you to sit and eat with your friends. Probably instead of eating with 10 or 12 friends, you're going to be talking about smaller groups because of the spacing, but you'll still be able to have a social time while you have your lunch. The biggest change by far, and I know for some of our upperclassmen this is going to be a bigger thing, but for this year to start with in Blended, we will have a closed campus at lunch. Why will we have a closed campus? We want to reduce the number of possible contacts you have throughout the school day. We don't want 3 or 4 students or more piling into a car and going to lunch together. Keep in mind that a lot of the spots you normally would go to have long drive-through lanes at this point anyway, so that is not nearly as feasible as otherwise. So at this point, campus will be closed to start the year. If things get better with COVID throughout the county, we'll look at opening it back up like we've traditionally had in the past. Students, almost all of you checked out a Chromebook from the school. Those of you that didn't check out a Chromebook, we'll be checking those out when we do return for blended instruction. Key thing though, on days when you're in school, make sure that your Chromebook is fully charged the night before, and then bring your Chromebook with you. We'll still be using Chromebooks in school like we otherwise would, so make sure they're always charged, bring them with you every day. One of the last things we need to talk about is what does the end of the school day look like? A lot of times when that last bell rings after 8th hour, there's large groups of students gathering to talk about their excitement from the day, as well as their excitement about what's going to happen after school. A key thing this year though is that just like at the beginning of the day when we won't open the doors until 7:15, likewise at the end of the day we need you to move on to the next part of your day very quickly. So within that 5 to 10 minutes when school is out, we need you moved on to either the activity that you're in or home, wherever it is that you're going to be going after school. When we also think about it, the last thing I want to share with you is that as I've talked to principals in other schools where they have been in person this fall, the key things that they've emphasized to me is the importance of everyone following the rules and doing the right thing. What that specifically means, it means wearing your mask, it means maintaining that distancing, It means if you wake up in the morning and you're not feeling well, a lot of times in the past you were probably tempted to come to school anyway. But in the time of COVID, we really need you to follow the exclusion flow chart that we looked at earlier. If you're told that you have to quarantine for 14 days, please do that. Please don't tell us that after 10 days you're okay to come back. We need you to follow the guidelines that are in place with it. I think all of us at this point know someone who's been diagnosed with COVID. We know it could affect any single person in this community. It knows no boundaries in terms of who it could impact. Keep that in mind, and probably most importantly, it could be really easy your first day back to think, well, this isn't like it was in the fall of 2019, or this isn't how it was in the fall of 2018. It's really easy to measure down, but I think it's really important instead that you think about the spring of 2020 and then measure up from there. Think about how many of you really wanted to be back in school earlier this fall, and be appreciative of that opportunity, knowing that there's some changes, but those changes are intended to allow us to attend school safely. I'm looking forward to seeing all of you back. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. You're welcome to reach out to the administration, our counselors, for any of your questions to be answered.